I believe that anybody can start lucid dreaming and astral projecting. I don't think it's just a select few, but I have a hypothesis that becoming lucid in the dream realm is kind of like a sign on the path that one's starting to become lucid in this realm also. And by lucid I mean like awakening, starting to awaken to the truth, to enlightenment. Even if it's a small little glimpse, I feel like they go hand in hand.
The Yoga Connection with Zorananda is a deep dive into the world of yoga, exploring the rich history of tradition, methodology, and practices both ancient and modern. Follow along as yoga is explored through solo episodes to guest interviews to understand its vast reach around the world. So welcome everybody to the Yoga Connection. My name is Zorananda, and I have the pleasure to sit down and talk with Juliana Garces. I was just mentioning to her just a minute ago that I actually started out as a fan, following her on Instagram, and just over the last few years, really got to see all the art that she's been putting up, and so over the years to get to this point where I have the opportunity to interview her and have a chat with her about something that I'm passionate about as well is really a blessing. So thank you for joining us, Juliana. And how's it going? How's your day so far?
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and blissful day. Just had my mother fly in from Colombia, so it's been exciting to have her visit, and yeah, just very grateful for life.
Nice. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, being connected to family. I'm I live in Canada, so I'm in Edmonton, Alberta. I don't know if you're familiar with the Western provinces, but yeah, I all my family lives here, so it's nice to just be really connected with the people that you love, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and so the reason why we're doing this podcast is because there is a post that you made on Instagram just recently about your experience with lucid dreaming and astral projection. And these have been huge topics for me in my life too. And, just what you shared in your post, and then also the kind of little video and little vlog that you did really spoke to me and really got me thinking about, why we have these kind of experiences and why it kind of just plugs into our awareness. And, it seems like not everybody does it, right? It's not a huge global phenomenon, but, there are these individuals like this who kind of get the opportunity to explore what lucid dreaming is. So I think in your episode, you were speaking about how it came about fairly early in your life.
Yeah, I was 12.
Yeah. And so, yeah, if you wouldn't mind just going into what that experience was for the listeners here.
Yeah. I go into it a little bit, in depth in my video. But to be brief, I guess. I was 12. I was kind of going through a dark night of the soul. It was when I first became now I'm not this anymore, but I used to be atheist at that time. So I really kind of, all my spirituality dwindled to nothing. And I was having a lot of nightmares at the time. And these reoccurring nightmares, I was having one where I was being dragged by the feet by some zombie ladies, very classic horror movie style. And then I stopped and I was like, wait, this is a nightmare. And I became conscious for the first time in a dream as a little 12-year-old, and I woke myself up and I was like, whoa, how did I do that? And I didn't even know lucid dreaming was a thing. I had to look it up, knowing you're dreaming in a dream. And I was like, oh, it's called lucid dreaming. But that really was the catalyst for my spiritual journey. And it's kind of funny how it kind of started in a moment of such darkness where, I was like, it's all just here. Like, there's nothing mystical. Like, I'm done believing in like the divine. And that was because of my circumstances in life at the moment. But it was kind of magical how almost like for a very short time, I really hit like rock bottom spiritually as a little 12-year-old. And very quickly the universe like, wait, check this out. There is like so much more than what we perceive. And I started having these lucid dreams like reoccurringly, where I started flying through the cosmos and dancing on Saturn's rings and started to have spirit guides visit me. And it just became, and I started then shortly after I learned how to astral project. And it was almost like undeniable, these experiences where I started feeling like I was living hundreds of years in my dreams just in one night, that I was like, there is something divine. There's so much more to this. Like, this is direct experience showing me that there is more than what people talk about, because no one around me that I knew was talking about these things. I saw a select few online where I like Googled it, where people were talking about these subjects, but I would talk to people in school, I would talk to my parents, I would talk to my family, and they had no idea. And I was like, it just proved to me that there's so much more than just what we see and the physical realm. And that's what drew that spark of me starting to be like, okay, let me explore consciousness. Let me learn how to meditate. And then later on, let me explore plant medicines, and eventually led me here as a visionary artist.
Yeah, and the interesting thing to me is, why it's even like happens to begin with, right? Like, there's,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's a sort of like initiation
Mm-hmm.
into a state of mind or a way of thinking or a way of being, right? Where there's like this point in our life that suddenly shifts everything in our
Mm-hmm.
awareness. And, I think even with that kind of experience, though, where you do have a lucid dream and it's kind of showing a path towards the possibility of a kind of life where there's still an option, right? Like, there's still a
Mm-hmm.
choice to be made. And I think this is what is interesting about being a human and like being here at this time, is that you could have ignored all that, right? Like, you could have just been like, my family's Catholic. Like, there's no
Mm-hmm.
way this is real, and I
Mm-hmm.
need to believe in my faith. But then there's something that nudges us a little bit out of that direction. Um, and and so to me, it's really about the like initial kind of like webs of synchronicity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and so, do you feel like in those initial experiences of lucid dreaming that like there was some kind of communication there, like you were being directly communicated to about, the kind of life that you're going to be stepping into or living?
At the time, it didn't seem like it. I just thought I stumbled on this cool like dream thing, and I didn't really think too deep into it. I was just like, whoa, like I can fly in my dreams and like be
Yeah.
aware of it. But now that I look back at it, I do think it was a kind of divine intervention of like, hey, don't go down this dark path of like not believing in the divine. Like, you're meant to be aware of the divine. You're meant to be in communication with it. And it really kind of like showed me that direction very like naturally, because it wasn't, for the first time in my life, that was where I wasn't just being told to believe in the divine. I was witnessing it directly, and that was what I needed to really, go down that path. Is, instead of just thinking about like, oh, like maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. Instead, like being it with these spirit guides and then taking me to realms of light and things like that. That I was like, whoa, okay,
Interesting. And
yeah,
um, do you remember like what the spirit guides look like? Like, did they show up
yeah.
to you in like a particular form?
Yeah, so there was a lot of different ones. I have a lot of spirit guides. But there's some that were definitely reoccurring. Most of them looked like humans. To put it simply, there was like, one with like dark, like black hair, maybe in his 30s. There was one with like kind of long, like kind of blonde surfer hair. There was one that was a bear, so not all of them were humans. There was one that was a human but liked to show up as a lion. So it kind of varied, but there was a lot of reoccurring ones, and I just after I kind of got a hang of it, I just show up, exit my body. So I kind of stopped as much going into lucid dreaming. I started to really focus on astral projection once I got the hang of it, of like exiting my body. And then I would just be in my room and I'd be like, can I get a spirit guide? And someone would show up. Often there were recurring figures. And then I'd be like, show me like what I need to learn, or take me to this place. After a while, I was like, that I started learning about Eastern philosophy. I was like, oh, take me to Buddha, and I'd go visit Buddha, things like that. And it got really interesting, really fun.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because like when I think about my childhood and even my own path of getting into yoga and spirituality, is it really started in a similar way where there was this initiation process of first starting with dreams and going into lucid dreaming. And it's wild because I have like this incredible memory of so many dreams throughout my life. They just like stick out so well. Um, and and so when I look at the the introduction of guides, because the same thing happened with me, is I would have like these like guides that would show up. For me, they stayed pretty static. It would be
Hmm.
like this shorter person and this taller person, and either they'd show up as like Yoda and Mace Windu, or like this like blonde hair person and this like tall dark person. And the dreams would just be like wild, right? It'd be like a huge adventure. And what it started to show me was that we have this human life where we have our
Hmm.
purpose and we have the things that we're going to do, like whether if it's just mundane, right? Like the job that we have or the school that we go to or the art that we do. But then there's this whole other world that we get to explore that we just like call dreams, or we call
Hmm.
like the astral world. And to me, it started to kind of dawn on me that, oh, I actually have a whole other purpose.
Hmm.
And a part of my consciousness is also experiencing this other realm. I think that is a part of my development. And I wonder
Hmm.
if like your thoughts of, if you look at your life, how it is now and everything that you've done, and then also that other world, did you also think to yourself, oh, I'm actually developing myself in this other world as well?
Most definitely, my astral projections and lucid dreams start to get so vivid that start to become more realistic than this reality. If people can imagine that, I know it
Yeah, that's
sounds
wild.
really out there, but it started to happen. It would be more HD. Like I'd be walking on the beach in the astral realm, and I would feel every single grain of sand under my feet, like more than I do in this reality. Like every little grain I would feel. It started to become so HD that it started to seem more real than here. And I have this hypothesis regarding why people start to lucid dream and astral project. And first, I want to say that I believe everybody can if they put enough effort into it, that it's not just a select few, but if anybody becomes dedicated, they can access the astral realm. But I feel like it's almost a way of showing that one's starting to become lucid in this realm. To become lucid in the dream realm, in my hypothesis, is that one's starting to become lucid to some degree in this realm to awaken. I believe that anybody can start lucid dreaming and astral projecting. I don't think it's just a select few, but I have a hypothesis that becoming lucid in the dream realm is kind of like a sign on the path that one's starting to become lucid in this realm also. And by lucid I mean like awakening, starting to to awaken to the truth, to enlightenment, even if it's a small little glimpse. I feel like they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and that makes sense. There's this realization that I had because in my dreams, I would have like superpowers. So
Hmm.
I would suddenly realize I'm in a dream, and then I would just have these abilities, and it's not like, um, how do I want to say it? It's like I suddenly realize that the nature of the realm that I'm in and the nature of the dream is it allows me to do things that I wouldn't and can't do in the real life. So then like jumping really high or having like crazy kung fu skills or like whatever is based on that dream. Like I remember having this one dream. I was walking around the neighborhood that I grew up in, and it was nighttime, and there was this one townhouse that drew my attention, and I was like, "Oh, I need to go in there," and I just like jumped into the second like or the second story like room like through the wall, and it was a childhood friend of mine that was there, and she had a baby, and she was like, "Something's wrong with my baby, you need to help me." And like she knew that I was coming, and I was just like, I was looking at the baby, and suddenly I realized that there were these like little green monster things that were inside the baby. So I like pulled them out and got rid of
Mm.
them, and then like continued on with the dream, and met up with these like this boy and this girl that had this like older man that was trying to get the kids to fight me, and I had these crazy kung fu skills, and but when I woke up, and I woke up back into this body and this life, and I felt how like more physical it was and more like dense, and I was like, oh, in that dream I was totally aware of these like extra things I can do. Like I was jumping
Mm.
off treetops, and the trees would bend to me and like
Mhm.
catch onto my feet and like fling me, and I had like this psychic control over things. And then I came into this life, and I was like, what if that's showing me that there's rules to this world, and that even though it's heavier and denser and more tactile and it has gravity, but it still has parameters, and there's
Mhm.
ways kind of around the parameters, and we can learn how to like take that lucidity from the dream and apply it into here. And that was like a game changer for me too. Yeah, I really wish I could fly. That'd be great, but
Absolutely. I think that the astral realm can teach us so much, and I think that's why it's like why we start having these experiences is to learn from them. One thing that the astral guides told me was that in the astral we can manifest instantly. So you'll think of like an apple, and there'll be an apple right there. Or you can think of like flying, and you'll start flying. They told me that manifestation works very similarly, not like perfectly, but very similarly in this reality, but it's much slower and takes a lot more brain power. So for example, if we want to manifest like being in a certain place, like if we put enough brain power for long enough, it does like manifest, but we have to like, it's just a lot slower, and you have to put a lot more effort because this reality is so much denser. But of course, like things like flying might be you have to put like a whole lot of brain power. Maybe if like one's like ultra enlightened, and maybe, but
yeah.
that one's really out there. That would be really hard. But a lot of other things like, people use it to get their dream career or have their dream home. A lot of things like that. It just requires a lot of brain power. And a lot of consciousness, a very powerful energy to manifest in this reality. But another thing that I find very useful, at least from that I learned probably the most from these experiences, other than direct messages from my guides, is that basically, if we, if, how do I put this in words? Um, if we put like enough effort, we can manifest, but also like these experiences that we can have there so much quicker that we can kind of move these desires out of the way. So basically, to become enlightened, from what I understand, is to be free of desire. to be at peace, no longer, desiring anything, just complete peace, pure happiness. And a lot of the times we have these like lists of things we want to do. And in this physical realm, they take so long to manifest and so long to accomplish that it can be hard to kind of like either let them go or to do them. But in the astral realm, we have this opportunity like, hey, if like one of our big things is to have a ride in a hot air balloon, we can do it instantly and then, go on to the next thing. So it kind of like burns through a lot of our desires very quickly. That's what I did. I spent like hundreds of years doing all the silly things I wanted to do. And now I'm like, okay, like I'm done with all that. Now I can just focus on the one goal, which is seeking liberation.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say it like that because what it reminds me of is the autobiography of a yogi. I don't know if you've ever read that
Yes.
book. Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, there's a point where Yogananda talks about Lahiri Mahasaya's
Yes.
journey into the Himalayas, where he finally finds Babaji and his like little crew of sadhus, and that Babaji shows him his like greatest desires, right? He like manifests this huge like palace full of gold and food and everything that Lahiri Mahasaya like felt it like in him karmically was what he deserved or what he like really truly wanted. And then, it all vanished in an instant. But it showed him that beyond all of that, there was the heart's desire. And that when you can actually go into the heart's desire, it shows you what your like truest like fulfillment is. And that the other like little worldly desires are all tests, right? And yeah, we want to get good at kind of manifesting the things that are going to satisfy that kind of like worldly attachment at first, where you have a good place that you live in, you have a good vehicle, you have a good income to pay for food and on the shelter and stuff like that. But then once all that's taken care of, then there's this new task of, okay, is there a way to get in touch with our hearts, and there's a way to settle into it, and what does that mean? And I think, to me, this is also where like psychedelics can kind of come into play, and then also your life purpose, right? So for me in my journey, like I started with psychedelics early, like when I was like 16 years old.
Me too.
And yeah, so it's the first kind of iterations of my psychedelic experiences were pretty surface level until I was 19 when I did a hero dose of mushrooms. And this is an interesting thing because when you were telling your story about your 5-MeO experience and how different it is from the NN DMT, it sounds like I had a really similar experience on like at the tail end of my mushroom trip as you did with your DMT experience. But, just kind of continuing with this thought of like fulfilling your heart's desire. So do you think that, through your astral projection that you use that as a way to like fulfill these desires, so you can like go into a space, you're like, you know what, I can get these things so fast that I can just do it here. So like what kind of examples would you have, and like what kind of astral experiences you've had?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to like thank you for bringing up the part of that book, because that's a huge reference point of like what I mean. Like that's like when I read that book, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I do in the astral.
Yeah.
Was that part, which basically was like they did the guru wasn't like, hey, just let it go, because sometimes these things like it's really hard to let go, and you actually have to like have them for a second. And so he had this palace for a second, and he's like, okay, now I had it, I'm satisfied, I can move on to like the ultimate goal, which is like seeking enlightenment, liberation. And that's the same thing. Like from a young age, I started using, well, I think most people do this naturally. It's like intuitive, because like when you're there and you can do anything you can imagine instantly. you're going to start doing all the things you desire the most, right? And then you do them, and then you do it a few times, and you're like, okay, and then on to the next thing, and you kind of burn through a lot of them until you've like done everything possible, and then you're like, okay, well, what now? Well, I guess ultimate happiness and seeking enlightenment. But I did so many things, everything from like you know being in Egypt, going to Switzerland, like dancing on Saturn's rings, just flying through the galaxies, visiting all the beings that I wanted to meet, all that kind of thing. I got out of the way, and it was so fun. But and in this life, thankfully, I've gotten to manifest a lot of my deepest desires also. And it's just interesting. Sometimes you have to have all these things and like do all these experiences, and you start to notice that there is something that it doesn't fulfill, that like ultimate happiness. And it kind of makes one realize more and more like the true goal is seeking permanent happiness, nirvana, enlightenment. And sometimes we can only see this when we've gotten some of our deepest desires and we see that there it wasn't it. Right? So it's yeah. So now just trying to focus mostly on that ultimate goal through enlightenment. And now that's a big reason why I don't do a whole lot of astral projection or lucid dreaming anymore, because I go in there and all I do is I meditate most of the time. There's like not much else to do. Now it mostly, I don't intentionally do it. Now how it works mostly is it happens like randomly, almost when I need to be sent a message. So if something's happening in my life and I need like this input, somehow I end up astral projecting, and I'll have like a voice, which the voice of the divine will tell me whatever I need to hear. So, for example, recently, not that long ago, I had an astral projection naturally on its own. I wasn't intending to. And I exited out of my body, and I hear this voice tell me um, that I have to realize that this physical reality is also a dream. More and more deeply. And that until I get that, I won't be able to kind of move forward. And I was like, can I please get enlightenment? And it was ironically, it told me software update not available at the moment. It really told me that. I was like, okay. So working
That's
on that
hilarious.
still. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like the progression kind of out of it, right, is I think it's a part of maturity, and it's a part of
Mm-hmm.
like leveling up, so to speak, where there's just a point where kind of in self mastery, there's things that you can leave behind, and there's
Mm-hmm.
new levels to explore, right? Where um, if going into the astral world and you're like, well, I'm just going to sit here and meditate, then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, you don't need to be here to do that.
Yep.
You can just
Mm-hmm.
be in your physical body and actually allow it to be much more potent, right? Because
Absolutely.
to me, it's like the astral world is like it's like another step kind of simulation
Yeah, it's more
where
phenomenon.
yeah, like
Ultimately.
I don't know if you're familiar with like X-Men, like the X-Men cartoon. Um, um,
I'm familiar of it, but I haven't watched them.
yeah,
Yeah.
so they have like a training room where they like
Mm-hmm.
simulate the battles that they're going to go into, right? And so I think of it
Mm-hmm.
that way, where the astral world can be this place where you can like simulate the kind of manifestation of your life that you want to see, and then you come back into this world, and it's like, okay, now how do you ground that into this space? And then how do you utilize the energetics of the system to then make it like more potent? Um, and yeah, it's like it's really interesting hearing your stories and how similar they are even to mine. Like even when I go into deeper states of meditation, there's very obvious a presence. There's very obvious guide. And for me, it usually manifests as like a more like a maternal, motherly kind of guide, and even the
Mm-hmm.
voice is feminine. And sometimes it's soft, and sometimes it's like super stern, and it's like you need to do this and this and this. Um, And yeah, and it to me, the like development of it all came about from all the experiences accumulated, right? So
Hmm.
that's why I think even like all the psychedelic experiences that I've had were all a part of that journey. And yeah, so I'd love to get into your experience with DMT. And is the have you experienced both of them before? Like, cause you
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you did also mention in your latest video that you've done ayahuasca as well, right?
Yeah, I did the most recent video I did is on 5-MeO DMT,
Yeah,
also known as like the God molecule or found in Bufal various.
yeah,
Which I had just one journey with that one, but you know, it's considered arguably the most powerful psychedelic, and is usually when people refer to, just for people listening, to DMT, it's NN-DMT, also known as the spirit molecule, which is much more fractile. And so I have worked with NN-DMT, which is what's in ayahuasca. That's what I started working with first. I did ayahuasca ceremonies, and then I started working with the pure form, the crystal form.
mm-hmm.
And I had that's probably the medicine I've done by far the most. It was like that was like my medicine. I have had a lot of ceremonies with NNDMT, but with 5-MeO, I only had one experience 5 years ago now, back in 2020. And that by far was the most powerful experience I've ever had compared to all my other psychedelics journeys. And it was, even though I had tapped into that formless realm, that realm of pure consciousness, complete ego death, like no self, no witnesser, no witness, just. um, and I had been there through NN a few times, and through mushrooms, and through astral projecting, just going up to the highest realm. But 5-MeO was such a deeper plunge, where everything else, even though before that they seemed like the most powerful experiences I had had, now I understand they were pretty brief, pretty much just dipping my toes, versus 5-MeO was just a full dissolve for what felt like infinity.
Mm-hmm.
So I still hold that experience in really high regards. And now, even though um, I've kind of experienced it, I still have no desire to do 5-MeO again. Now, like, my desire is, and I haven't worked with psychedelics for like 2 years now, because it's kind of like the same as lucid dreaming and astral projecting. I go in there and I'm just like, it's more phenomenon. Like, my purpose right now, my sole focus is meditation and trying to get to that mountaintop of consciousness on my own. Because I've been, I feel like, to that mountaintop of consciousness enough times through astral projecting, through psychedelics, through these different mediums. But now I'm like, how can I be there forever? And I can't do that with a substance. I got to do that through climbing my own way up through meditation. So now I just really focus on doing a lot of meditation. Been doing the 10-day Vipassana retreats. Hope to do another one this year. And yeah, just pretty focused on that.
Yeah, Vipassana is the one thing I haven't done quite yet. But yeah, it's the interesting thing with kind of comparing, you know, the psychedelic experiences then with like personal meditation is I've always felt that there's still like a little bit of a limitation. Like, even though the psychedelic can really show you and really dive you into
Mm-hmm.
this like really potent experience, that there's still like an artificial kind of sense to it, where whenever I think of some of the meditation experiences that I've had, that the onset of an obvious shift in consciousness and shift in awareness, and I don't know if it's like this for you, but typically when I go into a deeper state of meditation, there's two things that happen. One, I feel myself becoming smaller and smaller. So, and I
Mm,
usually am focusing on my heart. So I feel like I take my gaze from my eyes and I bring it down into my heart. And I feel like I'm shrinking and
mm,
I'm in my heart. And then suddenly I'm
mm,
like in the center of my heart. Then it'll flip and I start getting bigger and bigger. And I just
mm,
start expanding in all directions in a massive way. And then I'll feel like I am simultaneously getting smaller and bigger.
mm,
And there's a point where I can't tell the difference between the two anymore.
mhm,
And there's this point where there's like a convergence between those two like phenomena of getting bigger and smaller. And I suddenly just, there's no sense of space anymore. Like there's no more like, oh, I'm on a planet, I'm this being or whatever. It's like I've completely expanded throughout the universe and completely shrunk down to the smallest molecule. But then there's the convergence point, and I haven't broken through that convergence point, you know? Like where I know is like the like complete flip. Um, and it's interesting because I'll just like come right back to my body. Like there's a point where I'm like just about there, and it'll be like, and I'm just back in my body, and I'm like, okay, how long has it been? And I'm like, oh my god, I've been sitting here for 2 hours. That's wild.
That's awesome. That's such a beautiful way of putting it. That's cool how you experience it through scale. Like for me, it's so similar to what you just said, but instead it's like disappearing. Like basically for me, I start to focus on the sensations of my body, like through Vipassana and scanning my body. And over time, like my whole body just starts to dissolve. Like my boundaries between my body and everything else starts to disappear. And instead, I'm starting to feel like everything. Like I don't become small. I just like, there's like the boundaries between where my being ends and everything else begins and is until the vastness of infinity, they just kind of merge. I just like dissolve and disappear into it, and then I'm like start to feel everything. uh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how much like yoga philosophy you've studied. Have you gone into like the eight limbs, say like Ashtanga yoga? And
Yeah.
yeah, so right now I'm in the middle of doing a series on my podcast, like diving into Ashtanga yoga. So I just covered the yamas. I'm getting into the niyamas. But one thing I've really looked at is what pratyahara is. And so pratyahara being sense withdrawal. And when I consider the last part of the limbs, right? Like pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, um, that process of like losing the sensation of like the boundaries of your limbs is, to me, that is the initiation of pratyahara.
Hmm.
And it's so similar to me. And so like where I find it start is like whenever I'm meditating, I'm clasping my hands like this, and I like really press the webbings of my fingers in together.
Hmm.
And the first thing I'll start to sense is that I can't tell the difference between my hands.
Hmm.
And then it's like a light bulb that goes off, and I'm like, oh, it's happening. And I just watch it kind of grow and expand and kind of grow through my body, where I'm like, okay, I can't tell the difference between my legs. Can't tell the difference between my arms. Now I can't tell the difference between the space that I'm in. And that experience, was really helpful in understanding this like process of like, okay, now from pratyahara, then comes dharana and dhyana, right? And then into that final step of samadhi. And um, yeah, it's so awesome and not easy.
Takes a lot of discipline and
Oh yeah.
dedication, but it's also, ironically, it's also the easiest thing because it's like our nature. It's like returning home into just like being and dissolving into source.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, and it's interesting. Um, yeah, to hear you speak about not having the desire to like want to explore um, the 5-MeO DMT. I find the same thing where as soon as I do a psychedelic, it's like something tells me, or like, there's some communication that's like, yeah, you're good. You don't have to do this for a while.
That's literally what I've gotten in so many of my last trips. That leading up to now, and I'm not saying I'm never gonna do psychedelics again. I probably will. I just listen to my intuition, what I feel called. But so many of my last trips leading up to this kind of little gap that I'm in of not working with psychedelics at the moment, um, it like kept telling me the trip that you're on is being a human, being in this reality. Like that's a whole psychedelic trip. Like be in that trip. And it kept telling me that. And I was like, okay, well, I guess let me just be in this trip. Let me just meditate and try to climb that mountain on my own to that formless realm, that realm of pure consciousness. So really focused right now on that. And um, I'm still a huge advocate of psychedelics, and I don't consider myself someone that doesn't do psychedelics. Like I still very much do consider myself, because at any moment, if there's a strong enough like intuition and guidance where it's like, okay, you need to kind of do a ceremony now, I will. You know, just kind of listening to what feels right, and yeah, taking it day by day.
And is this something that you do on your own, or do you have like somewhere that you go? And you don't have to like say where it is, but like, do you have yeah, just like a place that you can go that someone like facilitates it, or are you like, I have my own space and this is something that I do on my own?
So I usually do it in my own space. For things like ayahuasca, I did with, with a group and a facilitator. With 5-MeO, I did with a facilitator, of course, and I highly recommend those substances ideally be done with a facilitator, just because it's good to have someone watch over the body so one can dive deep. But um, with working with just plain DMT, vaporized DMT, I work on my own. I set up my own space. I feel comfortable. I do a ceremony. I prepare usually for a handful of days. I do it very much in an ayahuasca ceremony style, where there's a whole preparation leading up to it, then like an altar, and really setting intentions, writing things down, and then doing the journey, and then integration. I'm very like ceremonial about it. Try to give it as much respect. Definitely not something I do on a whim. Like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that's important because when I um, think about my first DMT trip, this was way back in like 2016, and I was very deep in my yoga practice. I was practicing like every day, 2 hours a day, and my DMT trip really informed me of that. And I can see how there was a really interesting correlation between the practices that I was doing and what showed up. And this is why I love your art so much, because it like depicts like so much of what like what my even my own personal experiences have been. And I think the coolest one, because you have done a like a digital painting of Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So my very first DMT experience, I was with a few roommates and a friend that actually like made the DMT herself with a roommate, and so she helped facilitate it. And in my experience of, we did it pretty crude. We had just like a 2-liter pop bottle that we cut the bottom off and like tin foil. And but the interesting thing is when I took my hit and held it in, and starting to see the initial like kind of Fibonacci sequence like points that start showing up, right? And it starts to
Mm-hmm.
like pull in towards you. I was sitting cross-legged, and at my sacrum, at my tailbone, I felt my pelvis lock in place, and this like burst of golden white light just go poof, and up my
Mm,
spine and hit my third eye and like project a beam out and open a portal in front of me.
nice.
And Krishna came out. And it was the trippiest thing because it wasn't just like the image. I could smell incense all of a sudden. I could hear like
Nice.
sounds and like music and the like finger chimes. And he had all of his arms. And it was like all of his arms just like came out and he stepped out and he stood in front of me. And I'm just wide and I'm seeing this with my eyes open. And my friends are sitting there like looking at me and they're like looking at each other. And I'm like, I see Krishna right now. And then he just like it was just in this splendor and like in this bliss, and then went back into the portal, and then had the rest of my trip. But that's what was telling me that like, okay, yeah, these preparations are really important if you want to have a really significant experience
Hmm.
where something shows up really powerfully. That yeah, you don't want to do it on a whim. On a whim is going to
Hmm.
be probably kind of cool. Like I've done DMT a couple times on a whim, and I was like, oh yeah, that's like it's showing me something kind of trippy. But when I had the intention of like I'm preparing myself for it, that something powerful is going to happen. What you were explaining in your 5-MeO trip, right?
Hmm.
So what kind of preparation did you do for that one, and what kind of experience
Yeah.
led to
Yeah.
that?
So for 5-MeO, and I just feel like with so many psychedelics and with a lot of things in life, we get the amount of effort we put in. And I think with psychedelics, it's so true. The more effort we put into setting intention and preparation, the more we get out of that experience, the deeper we go. So it's so important. And I feel like it makes the integration so much better. So many people focus on like, oh, there's so many integration coaches and there's so many people that talk about integration, but the best integration starts with good preparation. It's kind of like our warm up in a workout. A lot sometimes we can get away with not doing it, but we're risking injury if we don't warm up, you know? Sure how to help you with that. There is Alexa. Um, but if we don't warm up, eventually we can get injured. So that preparation is like warming up so that our integration isn't this long injury that we have to do for a while. So for 5-MeO, I spent months preparing for it. It was definitely the one I prepared for by far the most out of all psychedelics because I was well aware it was arguably the most powerful psychedelic on earth. So I'm actually really thankful. The first time I thought I was going to do it, I prepared and I had been preparing for a long time, and that ended up not happening. So my preparation was extended, and it was like doubled. And then eventually I did do it, but I just kind of continued preparing because I was like, okay, I'm going to do it at this other date. Um, but someone told me, I forget where I heard or if I read it somewhere where this notion came from, but I feel like I heard someone to prepare for it like you're gonna die, and not like in a morbid, like sad way, not like in a cry way, but like to tie up all loose ends. So something I did, for example, was call my parents and tell them, "Hey, I'm gonna do this very powerful ceremony. Can I have your blessing?" And just make sure I was on good terms with all my family, which I already am, thankfully. But my parents are very supportive of my psychedelic usage for ceremonial purposes, and they love my art and everything. So they gave me their blessing. That felt really good. I prepared through doing the 8 precepts of Buddhism, which I often do in like meditation retreats or just when I want to go deeper into my practice. But that's one that I did for quite a substantial time leading up to the 5-MeO journey. And if someone's not familiar with the 8 precepts of Buddhism, they're kind of like these training rules that one can do to deepen one's practice. And the first five, most Buddhists do them like the vast majority of the time. We try to hold the first five all the time, but the extra ones are a little harder, and they involve things like the first few are really like simple. It's like don't kill, but it leads to like even not insects, and people can kind of arguably be like how deep one goes into that if that involves not eating animals, things like that. Um, don't steal. That one's easy, I think, for hopefully most people. Don't lie, like right speech. There's like there's the last few, which are a little more complicated, is like sleep on a non-luxurious bed. So I was sleeping on the floor for a while, which was very humbling and really beautiful, and actually gave me a lot of like lucid dreams and stuff. And not eating afternoon, so a lot of fasting, like eating from sunrise to noon, and then nothing after that. So they're pretty hard to do, I would say. After a while, one gets used to them. But I was doing a lot of those. I was also doing a lot of the ayahuasca preparation, even though this wasn't an ayahuasca journey. So that involved doing like having a very plain diet, not eating like sugar or a lot of salt or anything like that, nothing like processed. I spent a lot of time journaling, writing my intentions, exactly why I wanted to do this journey. I was very clear on that. And most importantly, I spent a lot of time meditating. So a lot of meditation leading up to it and tying up all loose ends. Like if there was someone that I felt I had something unresolved, write letters and, throw them away or burn them or whatever. Just kind of letting go of all loose ends. Like one's going to die. Like, what would one do? Who would you call and say, hey, I forgive you for this, or hey, forgive me for this, or, anything like that, like just feeling light. So I got all those things out of the way, had my space clean, like everything's like kind of right where I wanted to. I felt very good, very vibrationally very pure. It was like one of my highest points vibrationally, I would say, in my life, because I spent so much time preparing and so much time doing the 8 precepts that I was just walking on clouds, basically, so blissful. I was just sitting there like blissed out. So once I did the medicine, it just like I put so much effort into raising my frequency that by the time I did the medicine, it just took me like to the highest frequency possible, I feel, which I had the pleasure of being there while a lot of other people were being served 5-MeO and seeing their experience, like witnessing them. And there was a wonderful facilitator that I got to witness do all that, and yeah, very beautifully. But it was interesting how a lot of people, they had more regular psychedelic journeys. And the thing is, I think with 5-MeO, it'll show you exactly what you need to see. And sometimes it is more phenomenon, like, hey, working this out, or this, or it'll give a motherly presence or an earthly presence. But I would say the ultimate expression of 5-MeO is that formless realm, like pure dissolve into source. And yeah, I feel like and it doesn't own that space, that realm by any means. Like one can access that through many other ways, like with even with NN, if one goes deep enough, one can go there, or through meditation or through mushrooms, things like that. But I think 5-MeO is one of the ones that has the strongest potential to take one there. And I feel
Mm.
like that medicine in its full expression, at its highest potential, is that expression of pure dissolve into source, pure one with God, no self anymore, just one, just light. Um, have you done 5-MeO?
No, I haven't. And I would love to. To me, I just don't know where I would be able to go do it. I just don't have that connection yet. But you know, what you're explaining really reminds me of where I went when I was 19, when I did my
Mm-hmm.
hero dose of mushrooms, because like to me, this experience that I had was like the kind of most pivotal in my like starting spiritual development. Like it's the
Mm-hmm.
one that like really shifted me into seeking the way that I do, and trying to get an understanding of what it means to be not only a human being but to be conscious altogether, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how can we kind of enter into these realms where yeah, in my experience, I was with a group of friends that I worked with at a restaurant at the time, and by I would say like 5 hours into our trip, we were hanging out in one of my friends' apartments, and we were watching a movie. We were watching this movie called The Departed. I don't know if you ever
I've not
watched it.
watched it.
No. Um, anyways, I was sitting on a stool, and we were in the dark. And there's a point where suddenly I was gone, and everything went black. And I was just standing in this blackness, and I was no longer high on mushrooms. And I was just standing there, and I was like, I'm gone now. And I just thought to myself, where am I? Who am I? And as soon as I asked, who am I started to shift up and over to the left and kind of like up and out. And I looked back at where I was coming from, and suddenly I saw myself wearing white robes, illuminating white light. And I had long hair at the time, but I had long hair and a big beard. And literally the first thing that came out of me when I looked at that, I was like, Jesus Christ. And I was like, I'm going back in there. And so I went back. And as soon as I kind of anchored myself back into that body, suddenly my whole perception changed. And I just felt that my awareness and my focus was just so pinpoint. And there was just no thoughts, nothing. But then I looked forward, and then ahead of me, there was this yellow light that was like coming down in a cone. And then in the light, sitting on the floor, was this boy. And he had a piece of chalk, and he was just doodling on the ground, not really focusing on anything. And I walked up to him, and I looked at him, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the boy looked at me and just shrugged. And I was like, "What do you mean you don't know? You have infinite possibility to do anything you want with that piece of chalk." And he just kind of looked at me blankly. So I took it, and I was like, "Watch this." And I started to draw a circle, and I went faster and faster and faster, and it opened up into a portal. And then I looked at him, gave him the piece of chalk back, and went into the portal and went on this like huge journey into this like whole energetic realm. And there was a point near the end of it where I was following this like S-like shape wave that was like flipping all over the place, and I had to keep my focus 100% on it. If I lose track and look somewhere else, I'm gonna end up somewhere and I'm gonna be gone. And so there's this point where it flipped into a line, and it just opened up. And I was just in this whole energetic realm. I was completely like dissolved into it, and there's just no thought, complete awareness. My whole self was gone. And little did I know, my friend's girlfriend came home, and she was sitting on a stool next to me, but she wasn't there before. So she pulled up a stool, and she was sitting next to me, and I'm off in this like realm somewhere. And she stands on the stool and touches the ceiling, and I immediately come back and look at her, and I'm like, "Why did you do that?" And she looks down, and she's like, "I don't know." And then just got down and went to the kitchen, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm back." Yeah, it was like, it was so weird. And I was like, did that happen because like she had to bring me back? You know? I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And then like the whole feeling of mushrooms came back, and then, but it was like right perfectly timed at the down, like I was at like the peak of my trip, and that happened. And then like the come down happened, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm back. And I think it's time to go home. And
Yeah, I've
yeah, go ahead.
continued. That I feel like the ultimate experiences in psychedelics is that formless realm, and that's super cool. You had it through mushrooms. The first time I experienced that realm also was through mushrooms when I was 17. Just briefly, I was laying in my bed, and I went into this realm of where I just dissolved. Like there was no perceiver, no perceiver. It was just pure light, pure source, just being. No Juliana anymore. No boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Just pure source, pure being. And I came back, and I was like, that's the place I was before I was born, and will go when I die. Like everything in my being just knew that was the place. I was home. It was like this deep remembrance, more ancient than anything I've ever experienced. And for a while, I held that in my heart very deeply. And I tapped into that space a handful more times. But 5-MeO, again, it was like being in there for like a long time. It felt like just deeper, just went completely, there was no ounce of or a little cell left of me just completely dissolve. Um, and there was no phenomenon, because that's the trippy part, is that with a lot of psychedelics, we think, oh, the most powerful psychedelic would be like very intensely visual. But it's so ironic that it's almost like it becomes so intense that there is no visuals anymore. It's like because there's no perceiver or perceive, which I think is, it's so magical, because everything else we perceive, even in really intense trips, there's still kind of like a little window of witnessing, right? There's like the witness and then the witnessed. Maybe fractals, maybe anything like that. But it's when that dissolves, that relationship between witness and witnessed dissolves. I think that's the most powerful. And I hope that everybody alive gets to tap into that space in whatever way. It doesn't have to be through psychedelics, but at least once. And I think, though, that ultimately we are always there. For a while, I was like, how can I get there? How can I get there? And it took me a while of meditating to realize we're always there. We're just distracted. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember in my ayahuasca experience that one thing that ayahuasca told me, like at the end of my trip, because I asked her, like, you know, why are you doing this, right? And she outright told me that her mission is to get everybody on the planet to have experienced ayahuasca. And she was like, so you need to convince your parents and your family to do it. And I was like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I don't know if I feel comfortable. I don't, like, my parents are like super traditional Eastern European, you know, never done a drug in their life. There's no way I'm going to, you know, I can barely get them to, couldn't even get them to do like a weed edible, you know, as opposed to like some
Yeah.
like crazy, like DMT jungle psychedelic. But,
I thought that same thing. I thought
yeah,
that same thing. I got my dad to do DMT.
that's
And
so
he's
wild.
like straight edge, like suit and tie, businessman, like
Yeah.
very like, proper father.
Yeah.
And I got him to do DMT.
That's amazing. Yeah.
He had a good experience.
I think about it because like even like I'm noticing my parents are changing and they're becoming like way more open minded and
Mhm.
like they just did like a 40-day like fast together, you know, and
Nice. That's awesome.
yeah, and yeah, and so it's definitely in the realm of possibility, but I think like yeah, one step at a time. Um, but yeah, I when I think about like the possibility of like a worldwide phenomena of humanity kind of having the opportunity to um, get in touch with this like divinity and greater self. Um, I wonder if there is kind of I don't want to say like a gatekeeping, but I wonder if there is this boundary and this kind of like safety around it, because it does really sound like when I hear your story and like how lucid dreaming came about, how astral travel came about, then the psychedelics, and then like even your preparation for the DMT, like that is next level. You don't really hear you don't really hear people going to that extent to prepare for things like even the Buddhist practice, and so I wonder if as an individual consciousness or a soul, that when we choose to come into this life, that there is a development that is there even before, and because I wonder that for myself too, like as much as we're just like normal people, like we're also just humans, and we have these bodies and these limitations, but is it possible that before this life there's a whole other life that we aren't even really aware of, and we're kind of streaming into this world? Because I don't know if that's making sense, but it seems like there's like levels to this, and you know, and kind of wondering what it would take to get like a large amount of humanity to come to these kind of experiences and awareness.
Yeah. And I think that the important thing to note is that I firmly believe that everybody should tap into these beautiful divine spaces just because it is so healing and gives you so much purpose and clarity. But I don't necessarily feel that everybody should do psychedelics
Mm-hmm.
because there are some people where it would do more harm than good. And I've seen that. Like I used to be like, oh, everybody should do psychedelics, but now I've kind of matured in a way where I see that there are some people that just mentally it would, just distract them more, give them more suffering than needed. But people work with different methods, and meditation is such a beautiful method that I think does apply to the vast majority of people. People can do it safely. Um, but yeah, I feel like the frequency of the planet is going up, but at the same time, there's no one else. It's just all the one. And
Mm-hmm.
the one decided to have this human experience and to be right here, right now, listening to this or talking, just being right here. Like this is literally like the experience source wanted to have. And that in itself is perfect in its own way. So it's like the whole concept of like, oh, let's work really hard to achieve this goal of awakening or of tapping into the divine. It's like it's right here. Like we're already it. If that makes any sense. It's like that duality of like pursue the spiritual path, but at the same time, like it's right here.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, and that's the paradox of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a part of the duality that we experience. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the Law of One. I don't know if you've read uh, the Law of One, the raw material.
I have not. Someone gifted it to me, but I've never read it. I've heard of it, but yeah, I have
Yeah,
yet to read it.
it is exceptional. Yeah, it's really powerful. And yeah, it goes into that idea quite a bit that um, there's this like spiritual development that's happening, and oh, I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but definitely read it. I highly recommend it because it's yeah, it really sheds light on like the structure of the different densities of reality, and like kind of like what we're experiencing when we're going through that, right? Of just, utilizing DMT to like enter into this realm, and like what is that realm? And Raw in that book really explains it well. But yeah, I think kind of the last thing I want to get into is your art, and it really does seem like these experiences that you've had and the development that you've gone through has really informed the way that you create your art. And I do you remember a video, I think a while ago, that you shared of kind of like the process of like what it looks like when you're sketching it on paper, and kind of like how you're developing the blueprint of it, and then how it ends up the way that it is, like how you transfer it to digital art and use that medium. Um, and so at what point in your life did the exploration of your art come into play?
So I've always been an artist, and I use art kind of like journal entries of where I'm at on my path. I would say like I consider myself first and foremost like a meditator and a spiritual seeker, and art is how I express that and share it with others. That hopefully it'll remind them of their own journeys, like these beautiful places people can tap into through mystical experiences. So they're kind of like I go where a camera can't go, and I take snapshots of these realms and these experiences so that they can show like where I'm at, and when I make it true to myself, people can resonate, and a lot of the times it ends up being true through their experience as well. Like how you're mentioning how I did something that you experienced. I've gotten that quite a lot, which is really magical. Um, but basically, I started off making art just because language was a huge problem for me at a young age because I grew up between two countries that spoke two different languages. My first language was Spanish and then moved to the US, and I kind of flip-flopped back and forth at a very young age. So as a little kid, I was behind on language because of all that flip-flopping. I was having trouble reading in both languages, writing both languages, even though I was a normally developed child. It's just like moving so frequently, like every year between two different countries, it kind of throws you off at that age. So I started making art, and I would show people, and I would realize that it didn't matter where I was, even if I made a friend that was from China or a little friend that was from wherever. I showed an image to them, and they would get it. And I was like, whoa, like this like transcends this language that I'm having trouble with. These languages I'm having trouble with. So let me like this is like magic, and I became so fascinated with it. And over time, as I grew up, language wasn't a problem anymore. I understood English and Spanish. It wasn't an issue, but I started to have lucid dreams, and then shortly after, meditate and have psychedelic experiences. And I started having these experiences that I would start trying to tell people. I'd be like, I dissolved into source, or I saw this deity, or I saw this temple made out of diamonds. And I felt like the words felt short, just like when I didn't know the language very well. Like I was like, it wasn't sufficient. I was trying to explain these experiences to people, but they couldn't see it. They couldn't be there. And I was like, wait, let me use art for that. So I started painting these experiences, these mystical experiences that transcended words. And then I could actually show it to people, and they would understand so much deeper. Like it's like that saying, like art, image is worth 1,000 words. That's what it started to happen. I started to paint these experiences, and people would get the feeling. They would get a glimpse of what it was like there, or they would be like, "Oh, I went there too," and it would remind them of that. And it was so much deeper than what I could express words. So that's what to remind people of those divine spaces. If they've been there themselves, they can have like a little souvenir, because we can't really get souvenirs out of there. So they can have like a little something to remember. So in day-to-day life, like if they became one with source and saw, let's say, Krishna, instead of just like forgetting about it, like having a little something that reminds them of it is very useful, because then it can help us integrate that experience. And every day we see that, we can like, okay, how can I be more like that? How can I be in that state? How can I be more mindful, more insightful, more kind, more compassionate? So I wanted to create this art for inspiring people in day-to-day life. And if they haven't had these experiences yet, to like plant that seed of that realm. I do feel like art holds a certain vibration, and I try to put on the canvas the highest vibration I can, and I was trying to raise it, and just trying to put art out there that's high frequency. And now I also do a lot of poetry and a lot of writing, because that was a big notion I held in the past of like, oh, like I do art because I can't express it in words. But then I started to let go of that notion. I was like, how can I actually try to express it in words? And I started writing poetry with my artwork. So now usually I'll make an artwork and a poem that goes with it. And I feel like that really kind of, because there's some people that are more verbal, and then there's some people that are more visual. And if we kind of have both pieces, a poem and an image, I found that to me is the deepest way of transmitting an experience or reminding people of an experience. So been trying to do that, trying to work with both in art in general, and now trying to do videos, see how I can like mix images and sound and all this, just to remind people of those high frequencies, those highest vibrations, and hopefully inspire them in whatever way they like to help the world. Like if I can inspire someone, like, hey, like if I make an artwork of a diamond temple that's very high frequency, and they've been there too, and they're an architect, they can go and build it, or they can like go and make a song of it, or whatever talent. We all have all these different talents, these things we add to the world. I just want to inspire others to do that. So I do it through art, to create, through creation, through these various means, through guided meditations, whatever way I can create and put something out there that can inspire someone else to be the best version of themselves, even just to be compassionate, to smile to a stranger. I feel like I've done my job.
Amazing. Yeah, and you do it wonderfully. I mean,
Thank you.
the things that you share, and just the responses that you get as well too, right? Like you have a great following, and it really does show that the people that are interacting with your posts and your videos, and I would imagine both digitally and in person, from whatever events that you do, that the way that you're showing up, and the way that people show up for you, in how they support you, and how they comment on your stuff, that you're definitely making a large impact, and in turn those people are inspired to make an impact as well. And that's the thing that I like to tell people as well, that if you're looking at someone, say in the case like you, Juliana, where you're at like a higher level of operating, and a higher level of manifesting, that the best thing that you can do is just start. That doesn't mean you have to quit your job, or you have to leave your family, or you have to do anything like dramatic or extreme. It's that when there's someone that is putting out the love of their art and the love of their craft, that just looking at who you are as a person and starting where you're at, that there's going to be these gifts along the way that open up opportunities. And, even when I look at like myself and what I'm doing, and the podcast that I have, and, I've had this for a few years now, and in this last year or so, I've been really focusing on getting it out there. And as soon as I stepped up to it, as soon as I thought to myself, okay, I want to take this more seriously, I want to be putting out episodes every week, that interviews like this have been coming into play, and then opportunities to like travel and go to festivals and interview other people, that the universe really starts to like flower, it starts to bloom, like
Absolutely.
it's budding, right? And it's in its spring of expression. And so yeah, I think what you've shared, and what you've spoke about today has been really powerful and really impactful. And it's been
Thank you.
great hearing your story, and how far you've come even in your journey. And and that there's still so much ahead, right? And so yeah, I think we can wrap it up at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to add a little something
Yeah,
to
for
what we
sure.
were
Go
just
ahead.
talking about,
Yeah.
that um, never disregard how important your ripple of raising the consciousness can be. And whatever way we want to share that, like asking ourselves, how can I raise the frequency? How can I share that high frequency? And there's so many ways of doing that. Putting it out there creates a little ripple, but we never know like what how it affects someone else, and then they can create another ripple, and then it affects more and more, and we can create this big ripple effect of raising the frequency. And no matter, even if like we do that and we feel like no one hears, or just one person gets impacted, like that's significant. Right now in life, it's so much like, oh, can you like affect like millions of people, and it's all these big skills, but it's so important. Even if we have no creative talent, just giving a smile to a stranger and having them smile and light up their day, that's so important. I just want to emphasize that. So if someone's starting out doing a creative thing, and they feel like they're not tapping into these big audiences or anything, like keep going, because we never know how big of a difference just affecting even one person can be. It can change someone's whole life, and then they can change someone else's whole life, and it creates a big ripple effect that sometimes, most of the time, we don't even see.
Yeah. Yeah. really important, and I wholeheartedly agree. Um, yeah, because I think, like you're saying a little bit earlier, that we're on this like ascending arc, like we're in this upswing of evolution and, raising our consciousness. But then simultaneously, it seems like it's shedding light on a lot of darkness, right? And there's a lot of
Hmm.
turmoil and there's a lot of chaos. And it reminded me of so Yogananda's guru Sri Yukteswar. Have you read his book Holy Science?
I have not. I'd
Oh
like to.
yeah, that is a great one too. His like the introduction is what goes into this whole idea of like what the yugas are and like the
Mhm.
proper kind of like timing of the yugas. He kind of broke it down and related it to the precession of the Earth in the 26,000 year cycle, and placed us in the arc that we are essentially ascending towards Satya Yuga, which to me makes sense. But yeah, and that's where I place my focus too. Is that as chaotic as it seems, and how much turmoil it seems that there is, that we are in this like advantage point of having the internet and having social media and having like quick access to a lot of information, that we're able to see what kind of evil there is or what kind of negativity there is on this planet, to make that informed decision to do good, right? So just like you were saying,
Hmm.
like you're walking on the street and smiling at someone and making just a personal impact right in that moment on a small scale, and going from there to be encouraged to make that impact as much as you can throughout your day and throughout your life, so that if the opportunity comes to have a platform where you can share to thousands of people, that it's going to be a blessing because of the kind of blessing that you put out into the world, that there's going to be
Hmm.
a reciprocation, and the universe is going to go, okay, you are mature with this, you can handle it, so here's a platform where you can share this to at so many more people and grow from there. And it's a responsibility too, right? Like you also want to
Absolutely.
be dialed in with what you're doing, so that when you have a large view, that you're going to be able to handle it, and you're going to be able to be responsible with that kind of growth, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you said it wonderfully. And I hope that everybody that listens to this podcast today will feel inspired, and may all beings be free from suffering.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Yeah, if you can just quickly share where people can find you, social media, website, and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on all my the social medias. Just look up Juliana Garces art. You'll find my website, my Instagram, whatever your preferred platform is. I try to be on as many of them as possible so I can connect to everybody. And yeah, lots of love.
Perfect. And I'll have links in the description as well, so you can find all that. So thank you again, Juliana, for sitting down and chatting with me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. As always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy.
Thank you.